Hey everyone, I'm Alex, and welcome to this Marvel Snap guide on the best decks in Marvel Snap. And in this guide, I'm going to be taking you through what I believe to be the best decks currently in Marvel Snap. With that being said, there are a total of 6 decks here, 5 of which will use, some cards you need to unlock in Pool 3 and above, and then one of which is going to be a relatively budget-friendly deck that pretty much anybody can build within a few hours of Marvel Snap, and that'll be the 6th deck I show later on. And all the decks are going to be available in the scrub bar down below. I'm also going to include links in the description to each of them so you can copy and paste them, relatively easily. And if you are interested in getting some suggestions and feedback as to, what you can substitute for what card, let us know in the comments. I'm sure the community would love to help. Regardless, today we're going to get it started with the Dracula Discard Combo deck. This is truly one of the best cards in the game, best decks in the game, I should say. And one of the reasons why is it is a very consistent play that ultimately allows you to have a very consistent turn 6 and 7 with magic. Now, magic is not absolutely required. Magic actually creates limbo, which allows you to have an additional turn to basically clear your hand and ensure a steady hit for your Dracula. With that being said, if you do not have magic, you just don't put a 5-drop. That allows you to basically use your turn 5 and 6 to kind of dump your hand to ensure that Dracula, who, when at the end of the game, discards a card and then gains their power, is more or less guaranteed to hit Apocalypse. Because the important thing to understand is some people might want to play Apocalypse, which is fine, and if you absolutely have to because of the way the lanes have shook out, no problem. But the important thing to understand is that Dracula actually procs an additional discard on Apocalypse. So while Apocalypse should already be huge, you actually get an additional +4 power for Dracula just on that discard alone. So it's really important to understand that clearing your hand and having only Apocalypse left is what allows Dracula to have that massive influence on the game. From there, however, one of the major cards you want to look towards utilizing is Morbius. Morbius allows you to basically push a lane very consistently. A lane with Angela and Morbius is actually, and this is a pixel Angela, I should have used the regular one, it's kind of confusing looking at first glance, but the Angela is great because you play Angela first and then you play the Morbius into the Angela, and then Morbius and Angela just kind of ramp up as you continue to play cards into them. The Colleen Wing is used to essentially proc the Swarm, which allows you to have multiple copies of Swarm that cost 0 in your hand, which allows you for a final massive turn where you dump your hand. Moreover, Green Goblin can be used to activate the Angela as well, because you drop Green Goblin in the lane where Angela is, she gets the +2 proc, and Green Goblin flies onto the other side of the location. Lady Sif is very useful because Lady Sif and Colleen Wing allow you to avoid discarding Dracula, which if you discard Dracula, this game is pretty much done. And that's kind of one of the major issues with Blade. Playing Blade on tempo is pretty good as a 1/3, but if you have Dracula in your hand, you're playing with fire there. But Colleen Wing, which hits the lowest cost card in your hand, which would be Blade, Morbius, Angela, or Swarm, or Lady Sif, which should hit Apocalypse, or Magic for that matter, you should be able to dodge the Dracula discard by accident, because on turn 4, you got to get Dracula out, because from there, whatever you discard with Hellcow and everyone else is just gravy, because at the end of the day, what you want is you want Morbius running, you want swarms of stacking up, and on turn 6 or 7, depending on whether or not you play Magic, you want Dracula to have the only card possible to hit to be Apocalypse, hits it, becomes a massive power spike, and if you're a new player, a lot of new players are not going to expect this type of play. It should be a relatively easy A-cube snap and win. We're going to move on to the next deck. The second deck that I believe to be one of the absolute best in Marvel Snap currently is the Destroy and Disrupt deck. We actually have a Destroyer deck coming up too, so if you're looking for destruction, you're watching the right video. But essentially, the way this deck works, and I actually covered this in like a full complete guide, which includes gameplay, and that'll be up on the channel in a day or two. But regardless, you have a number of cards here that really rely on basically having a huge impact on the opposing side of the board. So for instance, you have Hood. Hood's going to come out, be a 1 and a -2, and give you Demon. Demon's pretty awesome. A 1 power 6, that's a 1 cost 6, that's amazing. But the nice thing about Hood, you play Hood as a 1 power -2, and then what you do is you kick it over with Viper on curve. And if you consider that for a moment, how amazing that play is, you pay 3 energy for a -3 on the opposite side of the board with Green Goblin. With the Hood, you're paying 1 to get a -2, and you just have to play in conjunction with Viper. And so that is kind of the basis of a lot of these combos. If you cannot get that combo out, like you don't draw Viper or whatever, you're able to use Carnage to get added benefit with Bucky Barnes and Black Widow, and the Hood, of course. You clear the Hood, Black Widow comes out, hits Widow's Bite on the enemy side of the board, and so Widow's Bite, it's stuck in their hand, they don't draw a card, they have to play it, which occupies the space on the board. And then Bucky Barnes comes out, he's a 2/1, he gets the Winter Soldier, my apologies, I misclicked, Winter Soldier comes out when he gets destroyed, and so it's so easy just to play Carnage there and just ramp up completely with Carnage, or conversely, you can use Deathlock to clear the lane or location as well. And then Punisher's fantastic in this deck because it's so often that they're just being zooed so aggressively that they have no recourse. There's always going to be junk on the other side. So Punisher gets all this free value as a 3-drop. Debris is absolutely insane. I mean, I know Debris is a pull 3 card. And there's some of you guys like, Alex, I don't have Debris. What's the replacement for Debris? Debris is one of the harder ones to replace. I mean, I'm sure the community will have some suggestions, and I'm sure you'll figure some out too. That's the beauty of the collection system, right? You get to be a little creative. But Debris with these rocks, it's absolutely beautiful because the opponent gets filled with all this garbage on their side, including these rocks. You can clear them with Deathlock, and you can clear them with Viper and Carnage, and Punisher gets buffed by them on the other side, and they just can't do anything. They're just running out of space when you consider the Widow's Bite and whoever you kicked over with Viper. And then you got the Shang-Chi. Okay, kind of unnecessary, I'll be totally honest with you. This is the card where when I designed this deck, I was like, Shang-Chi, do I actually need Shang-Chi? Probably not. He's one of the easier ones to replace, but I like the idea of having, you know, the ability to knock out those big death cards, knock out those big plays that the opponent's making. It's all about disruption, and Shang-Chi does that. Spider-Woman is an absolutely clutch play on 5. It's a 5/7, which is effectively a 5/11. There's going to be so much junk on their side of the board that you're going to be hitting 3 or 4 cards with her on reveal near consistently. It is an absolutely fantastic play. And then finally, Magneto. It does not have to be Magneto. It can be anything, even America Chavez. Another good one is Odin. But anyways, Magneto is just a very good disruptive play. You pull their 3 or 4 cost cards to the location, and again, it's very disruptive. The only disadvantage to Magneto is if you junk him too much, you might not even pull anybody if that's what you need to do. But again, it really fits the disruption motif. However, again, Odin's a good call because there's so many on reveals here. Even the Spider-Woman one that works really well. Just be careful with Odin and Carnage. That could be pretty bad, and Deathlock, of course. Odin is interesting if you're going to be careful with it, specifically with the Spider-Woman. But regardless, it's a really, really fun deck, and I think you're going to love it. Let's talk about deck number 3. All right, I kind of hinted before that we had another Destroy deck coming, and this is a straight-up Destroyer deck. And this deck has some similarities to the last one, except there are some modifications here. So once again, you are running the Hood. The Hood's beneficial because you get a huge tempo card in the Demon, and you can very easily kind of get rid of this 1 cost -2. And the Nova, which gives +1 power to everyone on the board on your side, is very easy to get rid of with Killmonger. Killmonger destroys all 1 cost cards, and the advantage to playing Killmonger here is if the opponent plays like a Sunspot, which is super common right now and pretty much in tons of meta decks, you wipe out all their 1 cost cards, and you really don't care about any of your 1 cost cards getting destroyed, because the ones that do get destroyed, Nova and Hood, it benefits you, like where you want them to blow up. Like you don't want Hood to stay on the playfield, so like it's perfect. And then you have the Bucky Barnes combination for Winter Soldier with Carnage. It's absolutely beautiful. You also have the Deathlock into Bucky Barnes if you need to. Colossus kind of withstands all the destruction elements, helps you play into Deathlock sometimes because sometimes that stuff gets awkward. But with the Destroyer deck, the important thing to also understand is you have to play something in conjunction with armor, because remember, the key play here is you're playing Destroyer. Destroyer destroys all your other cards. So even if you win the lane with Destroyer, if you destroy all your other cards, you basically lose because you only win 1 lane. So you have to somehow solidify another lane. There's a couple ways to do this. I was experimenting with a Professor X version of this deck, and if you don't have Hobgoblin, for instance, you can play Professor X because Professor X's lane will not be impacted by Destroyer, for instance. But I do like the Hobgoblin play as well. I think it's really good. Anyways, it's also important to remember that both Green Goblin and Hobgoblin do not get destroyed by Destroyer because they're on the opposite side of the map, which is one of the advantages. But it's key to understand that usually in 1 lane, what you want is you want Hood, Nova, Bucky Barnes, and Colossus. That allows you to, when you destroy those cards, Bucky Barnes pops Winter Soldier, and Colossus Remains. So you have some value in that lane to contest. And when you consider the Green Goblin and Hobgoblin on there, it might be enough to win. Daredevil, he can be blown up, but whatever. He can be in the armor lane if you want. Generally speaking, in the armor lane, you want someone like Deathlock. You want the Carnage, Killmonger as well if you played it. And then you want to play Destroyer, usually 1v1 or into like whatever lane has the Bucky Barnes and the Colossus combination, right? So it's up to you how you play this. It's just really important that you bear in mind that you are wiping your board with the Destroyer. So you have to make macro decisions as to how you play your cards. You generally want to play the Hood, Nova, and Bucky Barnes and Colossus into a lane that you accept is going to get blown up. Right? Conversely, you can play Colossus in the lane that you expect to play Destroyer for the extra +3 for a total of 19 power. But ultimately, the second lane you expect to win should be armor with your combination of value units like Carnage, Deathlock, and the others, okay? So there is some complexity to piloting this deck, but ultimately, it's one that allows you to have a lot of fun and flexibility. Let's talk about deck number 4. All right, and the next 2 decks are all about combo plays, and this deck number 4 is all about the Lockjaw combo. Now, it bears without saying that this deck absolutely requires Lockjaw. If you don't have Lockjaw, then this deck just doesn't work. There's no substitute for Lockjaw, unfortunately, in this particular deck. So, big sad if you don't have them. You can, check out one of the other guides or one of the other deck lists, or you can just watch for funsies. It's up to you. But anyways, he's absolutely necessary. And then the other ones around the edge, like I would consider Dr. Doom necessary. But, maybe you don't need him, but I think he's so good in this deck, and he's actually in the next one too. Dr. Doom's great, and the reason for this is quite simply, the way this deck works is you have Lockjaw, so when you play him on turn 3, whenever you play a card into his location, he swaps that card after it reveals back into the deck and pulls a card in its place. So the reason why Wasp is here is because Wasp is a 0-cost 1. Okay, you don't care about the 1 part, you care about the 0-cost part. So if you have Wasp and Lockjaw in your hand on turn 3, you can play both Lockjaw and Wasp, and you want to do that. Why? Because the more you draw, the more likely it becomes that you start drawing your big boys here, and you don't want to draw the big boys. You want the big boys to stay in your deck so you can hit them with Lockjaw. And then you have Iceman, who's useful because, again, 1 cost, useful tempo impacting reveal. So you throw the Iceman into the Lockjaw. You can also play him on tempo if you want on turn 1. It's up to you. He's good enough to do that. And then, you cycle him out. Uatu is an interesting one. This is somewhat controversial if you're like, bro, why is Uatu in here? Okay, so I had this discussion with a lot of the content creators, and I actually low-key think that Uatu is pretty good in a Lockjaw deck. You can sub him out for Korg or whoever the hell you want, honestly, if you don't agree. But I just like the idea of, I found myself often holding my 1-drops sometimes so I can play them in conjunction with Lockjaw. Like, if I didn't have Wasp, I'm like, I don't have Wasp. I have Uatu. I'm going to hold Uatu so at least I have a play on 4 to play into the Lockjaw, right? And then so what happened is Lockjaw, sitting in your hand, and so is Uatu, but Uatu is giving you value just sitting in your hand. As he sits there waiting to get fed to Lockjaw, he helps you understand the locations, and he gives you some macro information that can help you with your setup. I found it incredibly useful, so hell yeah, that's why I was using it. And anyways, and Black Widow's similar, right? It's a little more expensive, it's a 2-drop, but the impact I think is worth it because you throw out Widow's Bite, it really disrupts the opponent's hand and their board, and for that 1 power sucks, it gets cycled back in, right? It gets cycled into the deck and you pull something of more value. And then you got the Thor. The Thor's fantastic because it puts Mjolnir in, and when you have Mjolnir, you could feed Mjolnir to Lockjaw, which actually gives the +6 to Thor, but then goes back in the deck, and you can draw it again and give Thor another +6. It's actually pretty neat the way that interaction works. And Jubilee's the ultimate meme combo with the Lockjaw, because what you do is you play Jubilee into Lockjaw. Jubilee literally pulls a card from your deck and then gets cycled by Lockjaw and pulls another card from the deck. So basically it's like a 2-for-1 play with Jubilee, which is kind of cool. But again, this play feels really bad if you get a very top-heavy draw early on. You're like, oh man, I'm gonna pull all my crap. That's when it feels super bad. Jane Foster's a 5/8, just good, pulls Mjolnir, also pulls Wasp back out from the deck. That's huge to remember, is that on turn 5, if you've actually cycled Wasp back into the deck, Jane Foster pulls Wasp back out, so you can play the Wasp for free back into Lockjaw. Okay, huge play. Dr. Doom's great because when you get pulled from Lockjaw, it creates a lot of additional pressure on the board because this can be a little 2-lane heavy. Odin's fantastic. It reprocs Jubilee. It reprocs Jane Foster. It reprocs Doctor Doom. So if you have Odin in your hand and Lockjaw or Jubilee pull to Doctor Doom, you can play Odin on top of the Doctor Doom. It's perfect. Chavez is in here simply because, yes, it gives you a guaranteed 6 play, but that's actually not what's important. What's important is that you get a much more consistent draw throughout the early stages of the game to get you the combo cards you need. Moreover, because Chavez is always sitting in the deck somehow, you always have a chance to pull her with Lockjaw or Jubilee. It's always a target, no matter what's happening in the game. Chavez is always a target for both Lockjaw and Jubilee, and that's why it's valuable. And I mean, Magneto can be any 6 play. It could be Hulk for all I care. I just like Magneto. I have Magneto. I love the troll effect of pulling guys out of position. But again, it's up to you. But this deck, honestly, is absolutely top tier. I have so much fun with it. I actually did a complete beginner's guide on it from like top down, gameplay examples and everything. I'll link it up above so you guys can check it out. But regardless, I think that this deck's amazing. Let's talk about deck number 5. We've got ourselves another reveal combo deck. Yes, except this one's a little different. This one is with Wong. So basically the primary card that makes this deck possible is my Pixel Wong. And I love Wong very, very much. And he is a pull 3 card. And so pulling him might be a challenge. And realistically, much like a couple of the other decks, like if you don't have Destroyer, the Destroyer deck doesn't work. If you don't have Wong, this deck doesn't work either because, I mean, yeah, you get the on reveals and it's fun, but the real magic is happening twice. Those on reveals happening twice is just so clutch, especially when you consider the synergy with Odin. And yes, if you don't have Wong, you can still kind of make this deck work with like an Odin play, but that's just like an Odin control deck, which I kind of did for my beginner's guide series, ironically. But anyways, it's the Wong that really makes this magical. And what you want to do is you want to play Sunspot, who's a great tempo card. Starts off weak, but you'll find ways to ramp him up. You play Sunspot, you essentially play Angela, and then what you do is you storm into the Angela Sunspot. That gives you a lot of single lane value. And even if they contest it, you have so much reach. That's the point of this deck. You have so much reach. You basically want to make it so you shut down one lane so they can't play into it, but you can continuously reach into it. You can reach into it with Ironheart, okay? You can reach into it with White Tiger. You can reach into it with Doctor Doom and the Doom bots, right? There are so many ways you can reach into it, but on turn 4, you gotta play Wong. Why? Because on turn 5, you play the White Tiger, you send 2 Tiger Spirits out there, you're sending 2 Doombots out there on 6. It's just absolutely unbelievable. And even if you don't pull Doctor Doom, you play Odin into the Wong White Tiger, and there's just tigers everywhere. It's exactly what you want. It's a beautiful deck to pilot. It brings a tear to your eye when it really lands. Obviously, it's a little top heavy, but it's pretty good. The tricky part, which I think a lot of new people piloting it is figuring out the way Storm interacts with like the Angela Sunspot. You want to set up one lane for success specifically. It's also worth noting that Wolfsbane is an on reveal as well, so she gets a lot of value from the Wong, the Odin, and etc. Chavez is one of those cards that, like, first of all, I know everyone has Chavez basically, and in my experimentation, it was like, you know what? I kind of really needed Wong on 4. So I like Chavez, just like in the previous deck. It just curves out a little better. Like, obviously, you don't have the Jubilee here or the Lockjaw, so you're not pulling Chavez. But it really does help pull your Wong White Tiger a little more consistently. It's much rarer that Wong's not in your hand by 4 without Chavez, right? So it's extremely important to have Chavez to kind of curve out a little better. Wong on 4, White Tiger 5, and then you have your options on 6, being Odin or Doctor Doom. You literally don't play Chavez on 6, unless, like, for some reason, these are the last 2 guys in your deck, and it's the only choice you have, right? Even then, like, Wolfsbane's going to be better to the Wong than Chavez, generally speaking, right? So, I mean, I digress. But at the end of the day, this combo is absolutely wild. It is absolutely insane. And once you unlock someone like Mystique, it gets even crazier. But I was like, I'm not going to put Mystique in this because what are the chances that if you just started playing this game, you have Mystique and Wong right away? You probably don't, right? So it's one of the challenges of having this collection system. You got to, like, you can't throw too many advanced cards in a deck right off the bat, right? So anyways, guys, this is a good one. Now let's talk about the budget deck, deck number 6, that pretty much anyone can build, that I think is actually incredibly good. All right, for those of you that do not have all those pool 3 cards and above, and you're thinking, you know, Alex, I'd like to play some Marvel Snap too. Why don't you just tell me a good deck that I can build, damn it? Well, this one's a good deck you can build, because this one here is a deck that basically has a lot of components from pool 1 and 2. The only pool 3 card is Debris, and realistically, you can get rid of Debris. Debris is just a huge meme card that I just love, and so if you don't have Debris, you can put someone else in, even if it's Bishop or someone. It doesn't matter who you put in. You can just get rid of Debris. You pick. I'll leave it up to you. But anyways, basically, this is the Onslaught Zoo Deck, and basically the way it works here is that you have Ant-Man, who gets the +3 ongoing when the lane is full. You have Squirrel Girl, who throws the squirrels all over the place, and then you have Iceman, who is basically just a high tempo 1-cost play. Nightcrawler allows you to proc into Angela 4 times. You play Nightcrawler into Angela, you move the Nightcrawler, and then you can play into Angela 3 additional times to really ramp up the Angela. Armor should be played in the lane with your Ant-Man. That's not Ant-Man. This is Ant-Man. So that Ant-Man cannot be destroyed, wiping out for your entire lane there. You have the lane correction of Scarlet Witch. I absolutely do think you need lane correction in this deck. There are way too many circumstances where lanes like Jotunheim and other locations can absolutely wreck you. You can go Mr. Fantastic here. I like Mr. Fantastic because basically he's 6 value across the board. However, if you want to focus more on two individual lanes as opposed to the 3 zoo type mechanic, you can do someone like Captain America, if you so choose. Again, Debris up to you. But the real combo here is Khazar Blue Marvel and Onslaught. But let me explain how this works, because this is a very important thing. So it is incredibly important that you play Khazar, who buffs all the 1-cost cards, Blue Marvel, who buffs all of their cards by 1, and Onslaught, which doubles the ongoing effects, in the same lane. They have to be, the 3 of them, played together. How is that a challenge? There's a challenge in this way. You have to be very cognizant of how you play Squirrel Girl and Debris. That means that if you play Debris, you have to play Khazar, Blue Marvel, and Onslaught in that lane. That's 4 cards. If you play Squirrel Girl, you probably shouldn't be playing Debris on curve, because that'll make it so that, because Squirrel Girl, one of the squirrels, is going to occupy a spot, and you have to play, that's right, you guessed it, Khazar, Blue Marvel, and Onslaught together. So usually in my games, I find myself choosing between, do I play Debris or do I play Squirrel Girl? Debris is useful because the rocks do count as the 1-costs, so they do get buffed by Khazar and Blue Marvel, so they actually do get some value. Technically, the squirrels get 1 additional value, but they junk the other side, which is so useful because the opponents just can't deal with it unless they're playing a destroy deck, but whatever. So Debris is super useful. Sometimes you can even consider cutting Squirrel Girl, adding like a Korg or something, and keeping Debris instead. It's the interaction between Squirrel Girl and Debris that can grief you if you cannot play Khazar, Blue Marvel, and Onslaught into the same lane. Please bear that in mind. It's one of the only major challenges piloting this deck. Regardless, guys, I hope you enjoyed this Marvel Snap Best Decks video. Let me know in the comments what you think. As I said, all the links are down below, and I did a full beginner's guide series if you haven't watched yet. And check out this video that I have linked here, because I do think it is really helpful for players new and old to Marvel Snap. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in that next Marvel Snap video.